Welcome to another powerful episode of Untethering Shame, the podcast where we unravel the tangled web of shame to ignite the flames of empowerment and liberation. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and today we're diving deep into the theme of hiding, exploring where and how we perform and do our best to hide any parts of ourselves that don't meet some set of arbitrary standards. In our society, there's an overwhelming pressure to perform, to check all the boxes, and to present a perfect picture to the world. We often hide the realities that don't fit into this carefully cultivated image, burying our true selves under layers of expectation and conformity. This constant need to perform perpetuates shame, trapping us in a cycle of self-doubt and inauthenticity. Joining me today to unpack these complex issues is Janice Holland. Janice is a licensed professional counselor supervisor and a certified trauma model therapist. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in working with complex trauma, teaching and training therapists and coaches on how to effectively support those navigating the turbulent waters of trauma. Janice also leads a trauma recovery membership called Courageous Living, where she empowers women to reclaim their lives and find their inner strength. In this thought-provoking conversation, Janice and I will explore the origins of this pressure to perform and how it fuels the cycle of shame. We'll discuss the hidden realities we often keep to ourselves and the toll this takes on our mental and emotional well-being. More importantly, we'll delve into practical strategies for breaking free from these oppressive expectations and stepping into a life of authenticity and self-acceptance. So join us as we embark on this journey of self-discovery and healing. It's time to untether ourselves from the chains of shame and embrace the courage to live our truth. Now let's welcome our guest, Janice. Janice, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I always feel, it's like a weird conflicting feeling of, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be this excited to talk about such hard topics, but I'm so excited to talk about these really hard topics.
Yeah, I totally get it. I do, actually.
Yeah, I mean, because this idea I think it's the feeling that we know, also having been, on the other side of the conversation in the therapy room, is when somebody lets themselves go there and talks about these things, we witness just the flowing of energy, the empowerment, the freedom, that shift. And so I think part of me gets excited because by doing this, I'm almost preemptively feeling what I know could happen for a listener or to that listener's friend or the next person that they talk to when they get to that place too.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just, there's such a grounding empowerment of truth for me. So anytime I have an opportunity to have a conversation that's grounded in real truth, it doesn't matter how hard the conversation is or how hard the topic is, if it's truth, then I just come alive on the inside. So I think that's where even though I know there will be aspects of this conversation that will be hard, I'm excited about it because I know that it's real, raw truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm getting a feel for a little bit where you're at right now, but I do love to start every interview just kind of checking in with one word to describe your mental state, emotional state, physical state, whatever you want. But if you could describe how you're feeling right now with one word, what would it be?
Okay, so the first word that came to my mind is anxious, even though I don't love that word. I was sitting here going, is that the word? That is, but it's not like a overwhelmed anxious. It's a mix of excited, with a little nervous. I know it's going to be raw and vulnerable.
Yeah.
So that, brings up a little bit of the nervousness, but more excited than nervous.
Yeah, I feel like, I was thinking about this the other day and just the notion of, actually, it was in a workout class and somebody was talking about sort of the mental block of going up in a weight. We were doing a movement where you put a barbell with weight on it overhead. And she's like, but I feel like I get in my head about it and I'm a little bit nervous about doing this. And I was like, but I think there's a really important degree of hesitation or anxiety or nervousness that we feel, because in that case, I'm talking about sort of their physical safety and well-being. And, if you get too confident, you kind of forget about those things. But I think with these topics, it's sort of almost like a protective aspect. Like we know whether it's
Yeah.
for ourselves or for other people, it's like, I covet these conversations and this willingness to go deep on such a level that there's this sense of responsibility that I think gets paired with a certain degree of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So let me think. I love just kind of diving straight into it. And when I think a lot about, I talk about hiding a lot, whether it's in my YouTube videos and podcast conversations. I feel like hiding and performing are two things that are just constantly being called out. And I think for many people, they're like, okay, I get it. We're hiding or we're not sharing our full self. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts as to why is this such a thing? Why do we hide? Why is that like our natural inclination to live our lives? And then from the time we're young, it seems like we're basically just learning to perform and progressively sort of eliminating aspects of self and how we portray it to the
Mm-hmm.
world. Why do we do that?
I mean, I can only give you my perspective in that I grew up in an environment, a really religious environment, where it wasn't even really considered hiding or performing. Like, that's just what you do. You create yourself, you
Mm,
create a version of self that is acceptable and pleasing to God, to your parents, to the church, to your community. And so you don't think of it as, I mean, that's the right thing to do. So I think most people don't even really know that they're hiding. They don't realize that they are um, covering their true self. Or if they know that there's
yeah.
aspects of their true self they're hiding and covering, they think that that's what they're supposed to be doing. That's what good people do. That's the right thing to do. And
Mhm.
people who don't do that are the sinners or the bad people or so it's like this real mind fuck because for me, at least anyway, to come out of that and realize, oh, wait, truth is actually the opposite of what I've been learning my whole life.
Yeah.
It was really, really mess with my head. It still does sometimes.
I mean, I think that's so interesting to think about. You get older. So many people, if they're listening to this, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a 6-year-old listening to this conversation, but I'm assuming most people are 20 plus that are listening at this
Mm-hmm.
point. And so they're going, okay, there's this aspect of performing that's talked about. There's this aspect of hiding, of avoiding, of detaching. And we're hearing this all the time. But I wonder if that's part of the reason why there's almost a resistance that comes to it for many
Mm-hmm.
people, because it's the lifting of the veil. It's, what do you mean I'm doing that? This is literally me being me. And I just
Right.
made sure that I'm presenting the best version, putting the best foot forward to make sure that I am, whether it is from a religious standpoint, like being a good Christian, if it means like being a good
Mm-hmm.
community member, being a good daughter, whatever that is, that's just what you do. That's not inherently negative because everybody does it. So then I'm coming in
Right.
or you're coming in and we're like, well, wait a minute, this is actually not the healthy thing to be doing. And they're like, well, what the fuck? My world is kind of being flipped upside down. How am I
Yeah.
supposed to do something different if the whole world is doing X?
Right. Yes. That's what makes it so hard. And that's what makes it, um, that's why I call I have courageous at the beginning of pretty much all the work that I do, because it takes so much
Mm,
courage and bravery to even take the risk of exposing yourself or being seen as unacceptable or showing your dirty side or your unacceptable side like that. It's actually just our humanity, and that's what brings the connection. So many people
yeah.
feel like there must be something deeply wrong with them because they're doing all the right things. They're
Mm,
making the right choices and showing their best self as best they can, but they still feel empty, lonely, disconnected, frustrated. Just that sort of pervasive sense of,
mm,
I don't think we even know what to call it, but I see it as disconnection, as loneliness. And it's because we think we're doing the right thing and it should be yielding the result that we're told it should yield and it doesn't. So, man, I must be really screwed up. There must be something really wrong with me.
yeah. I mean, I think about that I remember the first time that I made the conscious decision to to hide, to perform. I was living with, I think at that point, I was living with my grandma, but still staying with my aunt and uncle. I'd lived with my aunt and uncle for a while and then was, we'll say, relocated. Basically, my aunt kicked me out and I moved in with my grandma, but it was right around seventh grade. And I remember sort of making those decisions to hide certain things. Like I didn't want people to
Mm-hmm.
know that I was on free and reduced lunch. I didn't want people to know that my mom was in prison. I didn't want people to know, X, Y, Z, because I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to be a part of the community. I wanted people to think
Mm-hmm.
about me the same way they thought about everybody else. And those differences felt negatively unique versus somebody that maybe had something that they were excited about that set them apart in a positive way. But I even had friends that had really positive, quote unquote, positive or sort of objectively positive things that would hide it to fit into the status quo. And I think when you're a
Right.
kid, you're not yet old enough to understand the loneliness is coming from that conformity, that
Mm-hmm.
drive to conform, because everybody's feeling lonely. All middle school, high school kids are like, I just feel empty. I feel lonely. I want to be a part of something. And it seems like that's what makes you normal, is to feel that way. So you don't quite realize, I think at the time, your performance, your drive to be a part of this collective presentation of what is fitting
Mm-hmm.
in or to fit in whatever way is that. But then you get older and I think it just becomes this automatic, like I've been checking the boxes. So I've checked every box. I've done all the things. If anybody looked at my resume for being a good human, I'm there. I have it. I should be a happy, successful, complete human, but I'm not. And I think there's almost this like the veil gets lifted on its own, maybe in a way where you go, oh my goodness, maybe it is something. Maybe there is something
Mm-hmm.
about this performance that doesn't feel good because I'm checking the boxes that some random arbitrary they gave me, but it's not getting me where I want to go. But now, not only do I feel confused because I wouldn't be able to answer the question, who am I? Because I've been performing this whole time. But now the fear is so deeply ingrained that if I didn't do this, do I have a place in this world? And that, I mean, to
Right.
me, even just thinking about that, like I've done a significant amount of work to break out of that, but I still go back to this feeling of like my chest being tight. I feel myself sweating a little bit. This notion of rejection being right around the corner of this realization.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can totally relate to that. In fact, when you were saying that, I was like, oh, I started feeling that tightness too. I was like, dang, it's still there. It's still,
Yeah.
I've done all this work and it's still there. And I absolutely can relate. I mean, I was the poster child for doing, I mean, every decision my youth pastor told me to make that I should make, I did. I mean,
Mm,
I literally followed text. I was like, well, you're telling me the formula for a happy life. Like, I don't understand why all these kids are like choosing other things. If you're telling me what the formula is for a happy life, I'm going to go with the formula every time. Like, why would I make myself miserable? And
right.
then realizing, honestly, I still didn't really wake up to the joke's on me until rock bottom it wasn't until, so I was married for 20 years to a guy that I was dating since high school.
Mm-hmm.
And we made every right decision you're supposed to make. And when he was 41, he finally came out as gay. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until that experience of him coming out, and that was a whole journey in and of itself of him even being able to come to that conclusion for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But it took him coming out, my life falling apart, my every truth that I thought to be true shattering,
Mm-hmm.
for me to wake up and realize, okay, I, I was trying to find, I don't even know how, it's really hard to articulate. I think there were pieces of it along the way that I was picking at and pulling apart and trying to reconcile, and pieces of religion and pieces of this that I would disagree with or separate from, but I still at the core, I didn't know how to believe anything different than what I was taught to be true. Like if you're
Yeah.
a good person and making good decisions and being righteous, like doing all that, then this is what your ticket is to
Mm-hmm.
a happy, joyful, fulfilling life. And there was just nothing left at that point. Once he came out and my marriage ended and everything, I was like, there's nothing to hold on to anymore. I have to start exploring different options.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like for you, it was a lot of, I think this notion, and this comes up, and religion is obviously one place it happens. It's not the only place it
Mm-hmm.
happens. But I think it's this idea of a good person, a happy person, a fulfilling life. The definition becomes too reduced, too specific. And so there is no ability to say there is kindness matched with the need for you to screw up, to the need for you to fail and make
Absolutely.
mistakes, that you can be an incredibly kind person and still, I mean, my daughter's 4.5 almost at this point, and we have this conversation because she's in this stage right now where she's picking up these different behaviors from school. There's some kids in her school that are very reactive. There's one kid that is really struggling not to put his hands on other kids when he's upset. And she's picked up some of these behaviors and she does some of them at home. And, you kind of start to see this little glimpse into what I'm sure teenage years are going to look like, where she'll, look me dead in the eyes and be like, no, I'm not doing that. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not prepared for this. But the conversation with her being, you're supposed to do this. You're
Mm.
supposed to talk back. You're supposed to push boundaries. You're supposed to hear me say no and go do it anyways. Because right now, your brain has to build its own spectrum or barometer to understand what feels good and what doesn't. What is kindness like
Mm-hmm.
for you? What feels right to you? And that's going to look different than what it feels like to me. But I think that strategy of parenting, that strategy of leading, of shaping young lives is very different than what you and I grew up with, which is I'm your elder, respect me, do what I'm telling you. And in particular, when it's this, not just your parents, not just your caregivers, but this giant entity of the church. And this is rightness. This is what you
Mm-hmm.
do. This is what it means. It's almost as if it just kind of inadvertently maybe bullies your brain into this, just don't even try. Just do it
Right.
because I said so. And I think it's that because I said so that you and I internalized in very different ways. And it basically, I mean, your brain, I think about, this isn't exactly what happens, but like synaptic pruning, like cutting off the parts of your brain that don't matter. Your brain's like, well, clearly we don't need this. We don't need to be doing all these thinking things. Here's the rules. We follow them. You just do it. That's what you're supposed to do and you're going to be happy. Almost like the extreme version of like Handmaid's Tale. Like, this is where it goes. This is what we do. And then coming back and going, but I don't feel good. And now the idea of turning inward and reflecting on myself feels selfish because now I shouldn't do that. I
Right.
shouldn't be thinking about my own pain and suffering. I should still be a part of that collective. And I mean, gosh, it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
you and your ex, you were both just trying to do that, trying to live in honor of this
Right.
code. And both of you got lost in the shuffle until finally
Mm-hmm.
he made this very courageous step. And then you accepted the invitation to do that also.
I had two thoughts as you were talking. One is shame is a very powerful motivator and parent. So
Mm,
it's powerful and it's easier to, I
yeah.
have two boys, they're 15 and 20 at this point, and man, there were so many times it was easier to shame them into doing what was right, and to
Yeah.
make me comfortable as a parent,
Yeah.
basically. Don't don't challenge me, don't question me, don't find your own way. This is the way. Okay, you're on the path, now I can relax, right? That's
Yep.
unconsciously we do that. And shame is a very powerful tool to
Hmm.
use to mold little humans into behavior we that is more comfortable for us, quite frankly. I mean, that's really what
Yeah.
it's all about is don't make me anxious. Don't make me have to challenge what I'm saying and why.
Yep.
Just do it. So I thought about that as you were talking. And then I also thought about as we begin to step out from under shame, like it's just so cool how the more each layer of shame that comes off, the more you clearly you can see. And the more you
Mm-hmm.
can begin to, so because as you're talking, I just keep having this thought of so many people listening, thinking it's bad for me to pursue my happiness. That's what sinful people do, or that's what selfish people do. Why is that the goal? So maybe we could talk a little bit about what that really means. Like why pursuing our or staying connected to ourselves? Why is that the goal versus the collective happiness?
I mean, I think that is such a great distinction, and I think two things come up when you talk happiness. Either people are chasing the experience of being happy, and because all emotions are a transient emotion, when it doesn't last or they can't get there in the way that they want, they're like, okay, so then I'm not deserving of that. I'm not capable of that. I'm not going to try for that anymore. And I think that kind of keeps them trapped in that feedback loop of just doing the predictable shittiness of the everyday
Hmm.
thing. At least it's not that bad. At least I know what to expect. I'm going to do this. And I think the second thing is thinking about, as you brought that up, there is this sort of, because we've detached from ourselves for so long, I think we've forgotten that our self is a part of the community. So when you think about being the best version of yourself, having the biggest impact on the world around you, whether it's me as a mom, me as a friend, us on this podcast right now, if
Hmm.
I'm not factoring myself in, the collective sort of domino falls are also suffering because I don't become a
Yes.
version of myself that can have a positive impact. And in fact, I actually become shitty. Like my behaviors are curt, shut down. My energy is, I'm on burnout, basically just trying to keep my head above water because I'm not factoring myself in and I'm telling myself, but at least I'm giving, at least I'm taking care of everybody, but you're not. You're just ending up resentful and lonely and
Hmm.
even more burnt out, which makes all of those actions even more problematic. So I think, yes, is the short answer to your question. I think that's such an important distinction. And those are the two things I'm kind of thinking about to build the case of why we need to talk about that for people listening to.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, this is something I talk about with my clients all the time. And actually, I work with a lot of therapists, and therapists by nature tend to be rescuers, right? They
Yeah.
tend to ignore their own needs and only meet the needs of other people. And so I do so much work and training around when you are not present, when you are not connected to your full, whole, authentic self and able to be really present in a room, it's a disservice
Yeah.
to the people you're trying to parent. It's a disservice to the people that you're trying to help and serve, because you're a shell of the version of you, and they can't feel the connection, they can't feel the genuine and the authenticity, and you can't, there's no power whenever you
Mm-hmm.
are this watered down version of yourself that's acceptable to people, that you're not in your true authentic power.
Well, and I think even thinking about this idea, because a lot of people that hear, the topic shame and hiding, I think they go specifically to behaviors or aspects. So, like your ex husband hiding a part of his identity, me
Hmm.
hiding a truth about my mom, or pretending that I liked country music when I thought it was the worst thing to listen to ever, when my friends would want to listen to it in high school. Like that is a form of hiding, of not
Yeah.
sharing parts of your reality. But I think that what you're tapping into is the hiding that happens on a much smaller scale, but on a much bigger impact. That every day someone
Yes.
asks you how you're doing and you say fine when you're not, when you're crumbling
Hmm.
and you feel overwhelmed and you're exhausted and you just need someone to listen, but you've convinced yourself that you're fine and to keep going. Or that piece of just thinking about admitting to yourself when you do need something, when you need a break, when you need to walk away. Even again, my daughter, I tell her this phase that we're going through right now. And we had a big conversation. And I said, I am really struggling right now to navigate this with you. I can feel myself burning out. And I know I don't have the same capacity as I wish I had if this didn't feel like it was charging me so much from an energy
Yeah.
perspective. But that makes it really hard. And sometimes I'm not getting it right because I don't quite know how to respond. And she
Yeah.
doesn't fully understand that, but I've been talking to her that way since she was 6 months old. Like she's used to that. And it's like me not hiding the fact that, gosh, I think I might be getting this wrong sometimes. And I don't know what I'm
Hmm.
doing because this is just as new for me as it is for you. I'm struggling. The minute I can do that, the pressure gauge comes off of needing to be the perfect parent. And it's the pressure gauge of being the perfect parent that I think is the leading to just do it because I said so, because I
Yes.
just need to be able to prove that I can get this thing right. It's less about controlling them and more about preserving my self-worth through this identity of needing to be a certain
Mhm.
thing.
That's right. I mean, the word that's coming to mind when you're talking is predictability. We want,
Mm,
when you are in hiding, life can be very predictable because you can manipulate the outcome. We don't want to call it manipulation, but it is. I can
right.
manipulate the outcome I want by keeping these parts of myself secret and by exposing these parts of myself and by shaming my children into acting this certain way. Then I keep a really predictable picture of what I want people to see of who my life is and
Yeah.
where I think our life is going.
Mm, I think that's so true. I mean, it's another layer I talk about, and I use this term predictable shittiness all the time of, again, just I would rather have tolerate the crap that I know than try for something different, because it's the fear
Yeah.
that we'll never get there and the fear that it's going to be worse than where it is. But I think what you're describing is the hiding is really a self-preservation because of that
Yes.
fear of, if I'm not hiding, I can't predict not just what other people are going to think about me, but how am I going to respond in these moments? How am I going to handle things? How many times am I going to fall on my face and fail? Is everything going to unravel? That seam just coming
Mhm.
apart. And suddenly, it's like the people that are afraid to cry or they're afraid to get angry because they think they're never going to come out of it. We
Yeah.
lose an element of control. And so we
Mhm.
stuff it and we hide because that feels safer to us.
Absolutely. It does. And and that comes from being a trauma therapist. It's typically a trauma response, right? Life
Yeah.
was really unpredictable, out of control. So we create these really unconscious, subtle stopgaps to create
Mm.
safety and predictability for ourselves. So I always like to go here with the conversations with clients and with people, is because if not, then we go into shame over the fact that we live in shame or that we hide or
Mhm.
so like, let's take the shame. Like,
Mhm.
there's very good, valid reasons why we try to create really predictable lives. There's very good, valid reasons why we lived in hiding for so long or why we feel like we need to hide. So I don't, the
Mhm.
last thing I want to do is have this conversation, have someone go into shame about it. Like, no, we want
Right.
the opposite of that, right? So just
Mhm.
understanding, having so much grace and empathy for um, the reasons why we go there with our lives. And then that way we can, from that place, we can begin to make really courageous, bold steps to live a life of authenticity. But that means that we believe in ourselves, we trust and our highest good is always working out and taking those brave steps forward where we don't know what the future is going to look like. I don't know how my kids are going to turn out. I don't know if they're
Right.
going to be this or that, and
Right.
I'm okay with that, but it took me a while to be able to get there.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so I think about two things that I've kind of had to learn in that process. And so one was a conversation I've had it at different points with my husband throughout our relationship. So we've been together for 14 years at this point, and we obviously both have our own experiences. Not everything was rainbows and unicorns for either one of us, but I come from a very high complex trauma background, lots of like a
Hmm.
very high ACE score. And he does not. He has, for all intents and purposes, a very stable home, very normal things. His parents not really talking about emotions, maybe struggling a little bit with these things, but he was never worried about where he was going to live, what was going to happen. Or for me, it was my mom in and out of drug houses, prison, jail. When is she coming back? What's going to
Hmm.
happen? And so we've talked a lot about my willingness to be inconvenienced is so much lower than his. He is much more capable. He's
Yeah.
an emergency medicine physician. Like, he is literally, I don't know what is going to happen in every given moment and he's fine with it. I am the Everly is not supposed to get out of bed before 7:15 in the morning. That's her wake up time. If she gets up before 7:15, my brain goes haywire because now the day schedule is off. Like, I have to train myself
Hmm.
to be okay with the fact that human existence is not entirely schedulable and controllable. And so I think just to
Yeah.
give that as an example for people of what you just described of trauma brains, and a lot of that sort of insecurity that we might have had being a reason that we crave it. And that drive for control can sometimes be why we would prefer the status quo. And then thinking about it as I'm trying to break it,
Mhm.
it's challenging. So we've had a lot of people. We moved out to Portland, Oregon. All of our family is still in the Midwest. And when they come to visit, it's very stressful for me, particularly because Jordan is usually still having to work shifts at the hospital. I'm trying to parent, I'm trying to entertain his family. I want everyone to have a great time. I'm very much that. I'm holding everybody's feelings and it's really overwhelming. And I just want to like slam your heads together and have you guys have a productive conversation. But I know I can't do that. And then I need my own things, but I feel bad. So I don't set boundaries. And so this most recent
Mhm.
time with people coming, I had to be more honest of I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I need a break today. I can't take on family
Yeah.
time. I can't organize these things. But the fear for me was they're going to think they flew all the way out here. I'm being so selfish. They're going to think
Mm.
that I am annoyed. They're going to be hurt. They're going to be mad. Whatever it is, it's so hard to get past that feeling because I think the other thing that happens, particularly for people that have had that kind of insecurity, inconsistency in their life, is a lot of the times we were maybe fixers or absorbers for the other people around us. So we were the ones
Yeah.
that made everything okay. We
Yeah.
tried to kind of manage it. The minute that I say I need something different, it feels like I'm stepping away from my post. And that also feels really scary. And it makes me want to go back to pretending and be like, just kidding.
Absolutely.
I'm fine. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Like, don't worry about me. But I can't do that. And that's really challenging.
Absolutely. I refer to it as our native language. So that is our native language. It's comfortable. It's how what we developed and how we grew, and we communicate well. And that it doesn't really serve us. It doesn't feel good, but we know
Right.
it so well, right? So when you start speaking in a language that is not your native language, it becomes really, we feel insecure. I don't know if you've ever, like,
Hmm.
I'm dating an Italian right now. So I'm learning in Italian. I'm trying to say sentences in Italian and I feel awkward and I feel insecure. And then I just went to Italy and I'm trying to, and I just am stumbling all around. And I'm like, I just want to go back to what I know, and it's allowing ourselves to stay in that really uncomfortable position until we find our footing, until we develop more of that language,
Mm.
so that we can find comfort in the new way of communicating and being.
Yeah. And I always wonder, as you said that, I was like, oh my goodness, that is such a great example. Because I think most people at some point have been introduced to another language, whether they've wanted to pick it up and learn it, they've
Hmm.
heard somebody speaking in another language, but we can relate to that feeling of, oh, I'm not very good at this. Or, you'll go into even a restaurant
Yes.
and you're going to order something that's in another language and you're like, oh, I'm going to take this. And you point to it versus even trying to say it because
Yes.
you're so uncomfortable. And I think, gosh, Jordan and I were having a conversation the other day and we're both kind of pushing each other. Like I need words of affirmation and I need a lot of that. My brain is very
Hmm.
loud. I'm resistant to physical touch in a lot of ways, but he needs physical touch. And so we were talking about these things and it's the same kind of thing. It's a different language. And I am still
Yeah.
14 years in of knowing and loving and feeling so safe with this person. It still feels like I'm learning the language. I feel so awkward, sometimes just even giving him a hug because it doesn't feel like it's my native language. It feels so uncomfortable. And I have
Hmm.
to be willing to go up and hug him anyways, even though I feel like I just want to scream and I don't want to do it. And I just want to revert back to like, we don't ever need to touch again, period. This is totally safe and fine.
Right.
And so I think that's such a good way for people to think about the moment when someone says, how are you feeling? Your go to is to say, fine. What if you didn't? What if you said exactly how you were feeling? But you're gonna feel that way. What if you
Hmm.
tolerated it long enough just to see that maybe you can still be safe and okay, being honest in that conversation?
Or even saying, I don't know. I think
Oh,
I
yeah.
can identify different seasons of my life. And even now, like, I use the acronym HALT a lot
Mhm.
that Addiction Recovery uses: a hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, then I will revert to my native language. I will. And so, um, in those moments, allowing myself to say, I don't know. How are you feeling, Janice? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it takes me a while to find myself again. I disconnected from my body. I'm not in it anymore. I'm not present with myself anymore. I've gone back to my native, which is in my head and out of me. And something will shake me up, but I can't immediately align all the time. Right. So, and come back and know and be present with myself and know what I'm thinking and feeling, and come out of that hiding in my head. But it takes some courage to even be able to admit that, right? Like we feel like we're failures or we're wrong, because when you're in that hiding place, the goal is to be right. The goal is to be acceptable. And so if you don't know or you feel scared, then that is you feel that risk of, I'm going to be excommunicated from my people, even though it's not really true and real. It feels very true and real.
Yeah.
That we're not going to belong.
Well, and I think about too, sometimes I struggle when people give that response. And I think maybe even as you're saying it, it's making me reflect on maybe that is somebody's attempt at trying to be more honest. Because sometimes I'll ask people something and they'll say, I don't know. And my automatic assumption is you're deflecting and avoiding. How could you not know? And that's, I can do in the therapy room, I can pull that back a little bit. I can be like, yeah,
Sure.
okay, so let's process that. What's coming up in your body, or maybe we just need to sit with it. Maybe this is new. In my personal life, I'm not as good at that. I think I
Sure.
sometimes maybe expect people to get through that stage. And so I guess for you, because you know that you do that, how do you know that when you say, I don't know, it's actually a really healthy, honest, vulnerable step versus another means of maybe avoiding a difficult conversation? Can you tell the difference in your body and your brain with that?
Good question. Let me think. I can say that there are some people in my life that I still don't feel 100% emotionally safe with. That I would say I don't know to because I don't feel safe enough going there with. Um, but I know when I'm doing that. I know when I'm avoiding or trying to keep myself safe and in what I feel is an unsafe environment, because they've proven themselves to not be emotionally safe with me. I can, when I don't know, like when I know I'm with my people and I feel safe, but for something has disconnected me, has triggered me, and I've kind of left myself. I know I can feel the lost feeling. I can feel the disconnection, and I've found now what will bring me back. It's conversation. It is actually physical touch, even though my disconnected self hates physical touch. I know that my authentic, genuine self likes it and needs it, because it does bring me in my body. And the reason I don't like it when I'm disconnected is because it jars my disconnection. It forces me to feel when I don't want to feel.
That's very interesting to hold that space a little bit and think that maybe there's, okay, well, I guess that's one takeaway for me to reflect with. Is there a reason that maybe I do avoid it in those moments? But I think that distinction is really key. And I wonder if even maybe something on sort of the flip side, because I'm so willing to verbal process with people now, and is that I think I also have to recognize sometimes when people say, I don't know, maybe even just offering that question of like, is it a genuine, this is as far as I can go right now, or do you just need to sit with this? Or like, what can I do to help with that maybe?
Yeah, just saying, do you just not want to talk about it right now? Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Offer that out.
Yeah.
And then maybe they will say, yeah, it's too much right now. Or they might say, I really don't know, because there are a lot of times I genuinely just don't know.
Yeah.
And almost all the clients I work with who are just coming out of really dissociation, right? Like who are just kind of coming into, I want to know who I am. They don't have a clue. They have no clue what their favorite color is, what their favorite food is, they have genuinely no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that maybe there are times where because I think having come out of some of those things, I'm sure part of it for me is having some maybe anger or resentment in some of those dynamics where it's like, I expect us to get past this. And sometimes I think I'm a bit impatient.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think for people in general, I had a client the other day who was like, I need to have some hobbies. I need to do this. And I was like, I just want to pause and back up and really focus on what the work we've been doing and everything that you're trying to hold and you're trying to make space for. And it seems a little interesting to me that now we're worried about whether or not you're going to take a pottery class and you're like beating yourself up that you don't have hobbies yet. Like that feels like a jump. And so I wonder if part of it too is sometimes I don't know is actually freeing for people to be able to let themselves not have to have an answer. And so I think maybe that is a
Yeah.
gift I could give, is to be a bit more tolerant in that space with people of maybe the I don't know is actually their big courageous step to be okay not having an answer
Mm-hmm.
and needing to be able to have me show them they can be safe and loved and seen even without it. To go back to what you said of, the vulnerability of being able to exist in that state.
Absolutely. So powerful. So in my membership and I have a 90-day journey I do with women, one whole phase, I have 6 phases. One entire phase is just holding space, is allowing emptiness, is allowing the unknown, is allowing, because once you clear all of this bullshit out, you have to be you have to be courageous enough to stand there as an empty container, not trying to reach something or go to something, but just be,
Mm-hmm.
so that desire has room to emerge, so that something has room to blossom and grow and develop. But if we're not willing to hold the space and not know and create, then we just will anxiously grab to something and try to create through that. Right. And instead of allowing the authenticity to emerge, because it's been so suppressed for so many years. And quite frankly, most of us, it's like an arm that never grew. It's going to take a while for that to grow and develop. And if we can't be courageous enough to hold space for it, then it will never have an opportunity to. We'll just remain in this semi-anxious state of trying to manipulate something that feels authentic, but it isn't really, because we're not willing to just hold the space for it.
Yeah. Which I think, a lot of this really comes down to when people think about, okay, so what do I do? How do I stop performing and hiding? It sounds like kind of one of the aspects is to recognize that you have in some way performed or hid. And the grace around this was you trying to respond to an environment that this felt like the best way for you to feel secure, for you to be okay, and your brain and body,
Absolutely.
kind of
Yeah.
doing the best it could. And then it's starting to think about allowing the possibility, at least for me, the two things come up is kind of considering what are the fears that I have if I didn't do that? Like, what are those immediate things that come up? Because those are going to be the things that actively work to talk me out of the next phases. And then sort of the third phase, it sounds like, is, and as you're kind of sitting with those fears, can you also, whether it's just schedule reduction or just sort of a mental openness of maybe you're laying in your bed at night and maybe instead of picking up the book or your phone, you just let your brain wander for 20 minutes. But it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
our brain and our body need more space to just be curious and to allow that sort of
Yeah.
almost like a wave going in and out and just like allowing it to see what sticks. And that's really uncomfortable because I think we're addicted to the doing as an attachment to that performance and that kind of escaping any element of doubt or somebody seeing the cracks in the foundation if we slow down.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So one of the foundational pillars of the trauma model is this pervasive avoidance of feelings. Like what we say is, what is saying no to your drug of choice? So then there's the obvious drugs, right? But then there's a whole slew of drugs that we prescribe to, that's doing, that's overworking, that's overthinking, that's anxiety, like saying no to all of those things and just being, sort of like what you were describing. But it requires so much confidence is the word that comes to mind, because it's not predictable, right? Like I can't, if I'm just being, I can't predict what's going to come up of that. I can't predict how big my emotions are going to get. I can't predict what my desire is going to be. And then I can manipulate making that happen. Like, I just have to be comfortable and confident enough to be and trust that I have the resources within me to work it out, whatever it is that comes my way.
Yeah. I feel like in the last year or two, I've been really marinating on the process and the application of radical acceptance in everything that I do, and realizing, just using Everly as an example again, because I think whether you're a parent or you've known a little human, like, it is this literally the thing that challenges you to accept what you can and can't control every day. And I think we have this idea of, whether it was checking all the boxes, I went to college, I got married, I bought a house, I did all the things. Why am I not happy? Or like, I've done all the TikTok gentle parenting things. Why is this not fucking working? Like, just recognizing that the human existence is not controllable in the sense of what's going on around us and how other people respond and all these environmental factors. But the controllable piece is us establishing roots within ourselves and being honest about who we are, or at least open to the process of discovering who we are. Because a lot of the times, like you said, the I don't know might really be a season that we're in for quite a while, and that's okay too. So I'm thinking about this as we come to a close, because you do a lot of work. Like, this is your bread and butter. This is your jam with people. And this is the storyline work that you are really helping people reframe. And so we kind of gave a few different examples, but I'm curious if you were to give people, okay, when you're done with this, once you've had time to just digest this, whether it's, you listen to it one time and you feel good, you come back to it for a few times, whatever it is, what would you recommend to them as their next step, the next 1% that they could work on? And then simultaneously, if you can tell us a bit more about when they're ready for the next, 2 to 50 steps, what does that look like if they're interested in maybe pursuing some things with you as well?
One thing I always work with women on, something you can take away and do right now, is working on your ability to receive. So many of us, because we've been hurt, because we've been let down, because we're trying to protect ourselves from pain, we are not comfortable receiving. We'd much rather be the doer. So if you're not comfortable receiving gifts, especially random gifts, if somebody says, "Can I do something for you?" If you're like, "No, absolutely not," like, you would rather die than let somebody take a piece of your project at work or do something for you, right? These are little indicators that, like, okay, there's a receptivity problem. So this is something that you can work on right away, is what areas can you allow yourself to just receive? Because there's a beingness in receptivity. And there is you have to see me in order for me to allow you to do something for me or give to me, right? So this is one really practical way, and it's kind of twofold. It can be really illuminating for people to be like, "Wow, okay, well, this is really, really uncomfortable for me," because I think theoretically we can understand that a healthy relationship has an equal amount of giving, receiving in it. But many of us who are not comfortable in receptivity, we magnetize to people who are not comfortable in giving, right? They are comfortable in receptivity. So we're doing all the giving, they're doing all the receiving, and then that's when that imbalance takes place. So to answer your question, one thing you can begin to do to begin to create a sense of balance in your life, a sense of beingness in your life, is look for areas where you can be open to receptivity, and or how blocked is your life in general from any form of receptivity. Right. So that's can be kind of a little bit of an indicator. The work that I do is I have a 90-day journey where I take women who are really ready. Maybe you've done quite a bit of therapeutic work before. Maybe you're just starting out on the journey, but it's women who are really ready to come into their own. They understand what it's cost them to be in hiding, to be in performance, to be disconnected from their true sense of self. But I think a lot of people are like, okay, I get that I am disconnected, but I don't even know where to start. Like, what does this mean? Is this going to be years of therapy? Is this going to be, So I've really, really narrowed it down to like, no, there are 6 very specific steps that we need to address and look at and go through. And you can do these steps in 90 days. And I draw it in a circle because it is cyclical, right? Like, yes, you do a lot of the initial work in 90 days and you feel like you have depending on where you're at in your life, some people are like, I fully know myself at the end of the 90 days. And some people are like, okay, I see her.
Yep.
And I'm going to keep walking towards her. And I'm just going to keep doing the work through these 6 steps until I can own her a little more. But it just lights me up when I get to do that. It's just so amazing and so fun to get to walk women through. I don't even like to use the word empowerment because I feel like that word has been used in really, some people have a real negative connotation with the word empowerment, but I mean it in a way of you just being comfortable in your own skin.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling like you can just show up as you and you can take me or you can leave me. And because when you're able to do that, then you attract other people who are so lovely to be around and who nurture you and you nurture them. And it's like living on a different planet, even though we're on the same planet. You just attract a whole different set of people and your life becomes calm. Even though my life, it's not logistically any less busy, it feels very calm and peaceful day to day.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think really helping people with that process of, it's really just an internal shift. It's the example I think about is, I forget what book my husband was reading, but he was talking about and kind of sharing this notion of people that are like, I'm in traffic versus I'm a part of traffic. And so you're so mad and you're so inconvenienced by the rest of the world because how dare they decide to drive their car when you need to drive your car or want to drive your car instead of going, oh, I'm also in the car. I am a part of this system. And the reframe, it doesn't make the traffic any less. But if I can be in the car and I can reframe the way that I'm feeling while I'm in the car, the experience is so much different. And so I think that's a lot of what you're describing is the circumstances around you aren't necessarily going to change. Maybe some as you ebb and flow or kind of move people in and out of your life.
Sure.
But to live is to have chaos because there is no way to not have that. That's what it means to have a human existence. Things are always changing. And so I really like that what you're describing is kind of an opportunity for people to feel that sense of centering in themselves and to feel less like their tree is going to be blowing over, depending on if somebody doesn't like them, if somebody's upset with them, if somebody doesn't respect their boundary, and instead being able to go, gosh, that still hurts when somebody doesn't respect my boundary. I also have done the work to trust that I'm allowed to have a boundary and their response is not about me not having validity to what I'm asking for or need. This is about them. And I can feel that pain, but I'm not going to take on that pain. And I think that shift is so powerful. And so listen,
so powerful.
We're going to have all the links for everything for people to connect with you down in the show notes. I am so excited. Listeners, there's just, I think what you described earlier, Janice, about just this notion of layers and kind of the more you peel back, I feel like this episode is really just the initial invitation to peel back a couple layers and to allow yourself to kind of think about it and then really to turn towards whether it's your program, if they're already working with a therapist, if it's something that any of us can do to support you, it's realizing that you are allowed to ask for support and help to undo some of those layers. And I think one of the things that I needed to hear many, many times is that it's not reasonable, feasible, or compassionate to yourself or to other people to expect that you can do it all on your own. Because I think for many of us, we go, well, I should be able to fix it. I've been fixing everything. That's my job. I should fix it. I'm going to buy all the books. I'm going to do the things. But again, your brain has been programmed to function the best way it can to keep itself safe. And having somebody on the outside be able to point out when you might be going to those places. In your case, you identified you dissociate from your body in different ways. Like having somebody help us make those connections is so key. And then also creates those invitations for vulnerability. And so listeners, call on your community and your support. And if you're struggling to find people, guess what? You just listened to an amazing expert on this topic who has a 90-day program that you can go and invest in. So there's already resources right here available to you. Janice, thank you so much. I just feel like we've only hit the first 2 or 3 layers and my cup is already so full.
I know,
so
yeah.
I appreciate it so much.
It's a great conversation.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, remember, come back to this as many times as you need and want to. Give yourself some space and permission to just process this in the way that your body and your mental and emotional self can. Take with you one thing. That's it. We're just asking you to take one thing. You don't need to take it all. And when you're ready, we will see you back here for our next episode.